Kevin and Elizabeth had everything: love, wealth, and a future filled with promise. But on the happiest day of their lives, something went horribly wrong. What happened in the Swiss Alps will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to uncover the shocking truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Kevin and Elizabeth had known each other for as long as they could remember. Their lives had intertwined since childhood, growing up in the same elite social circles, attending the same prestigious schools, and spending summers in the same lavish resorts. They weren't just childhood acquaintances. They were best friends who had grown up sharing their dreams, their fears, and their ambitions. Kevin was the kind of boy who exuded confidence without arrogance. He was tall, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that could disarm anyone. He had an effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him, yet he remained grounded, always carrying an air of sincerity. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was radiant in a way that wasn't just about beauty, though she was undeniably stunning. Her warmth, intelligence, and quiet determination set her apart. She was the kind of girl who never had to demand attention. It found her naturally. By the time they reached 16, their friendship had blossomed into something deeper. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or a love born out of rebellion. It was steady, unwavering, and deeply rooted in years of knowing each other inside and out. Unlike many young relationships that burned bright and faded fast, theirs endured. They faced challenges together, weathering disagreements and the pressures of growing up in families where expectations were high. But nothing shook their bond. As they entered their 20s, they had already built successful careers. Kevin had taken the corporate route, following in his father's footsteps and excelling in finance. Elizabeth, with her sharp intellect and refined taste, had pursued a career in interior design, quickly becoming a sought-after name among the elite. Their wealth afforded them a luxurious lifestyle, but their relationship was never about status or convenience. It was genuine. They loved each other not because they had to, but because they couldn't imagine a life apart. One night, Elizabeth surprised Kevin with an impromptu trip to Dubai. She had booked them a stay at one of the most opulent hotels in the city, a towering marvel of glass and steel that overlooked the vast desert and the glittering cityscape. It was meant to be a getaway, a moment for them to unwind from their busy lives. What Elizabeth didn't know was that Kevin had been planning something even bigger. For weeks, he had been agonizing over the perfect way to propose. He wanted it to be unforgettable, something that would stay with them forever. The ring had cost him a small fortune, a massive diamond set in platinum, a reflection of just how much she meant to him. He had rehearsed the words in his mind over and over again, but nothing prepared him for the moment itself. One evening, under the canopy of a star-studded sky, Kevin finally found the courage. They were standing on a rooftop terrace, the city lights flickering below them, the warm desert breeze carrying the distant sounds of life below. His heart pounded as he took her hands in his. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I've loved you for as long as I can remember. You are my best friend, my greatest love, and the only person I want to spend forever with." Elizabeth's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly as realization dawned. Kevin lowered himself onto one knee, pulling out the small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" He barely had time to register her reaction before she gasped, tears filling her eyes, and threw herself into his arms. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she cried, laughing through her tears. As they kissed, Fireworks erupted in the sky above them as if the universe itself was celebrating their love. They held each other tightly, whispering promises of forever. In that moment, nothing else mattered. It was perfect. Over the next year, wedding preparations consumed their lives. Every detail was carefully curated, every choice meticulously made to reflect the grandeur of their love. They didn't just want a wedding. They wanted an event that would be remembered for a lifetime. Kevin and Elizabeth were ready to embark on their forever. They just didn't know how tragically short that forever would be. The day of the wedding arrived, bringing with it an atmosphere of joy, anticipation, and the weight of a love story that had been years in the making. The grand venue they had chosen was nothing short of breathtaking, a castle nestled deep in the heart of the Swiss Alps, where the sky stretched endlessly above the snow-capped peaks and the emerald-green meadows below rolled out like a dream. The shimmering lake at the base of the mountains reflected the grandeur of the day, and for Kevin and Elizabeth, this place felt like the perfect embodiment of their love. Timeless, magnificent, and untouchable. Elizabeth stood in her bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, as a stylist carefully adjusted the delicate silk of her wedding gown. The dress was nothing short of a masterpiece, hugging her figure in a way that made her look ethereal. The long train trailed behind her like a whisper of elegance, and the fine white veil cascaded down her back, moving with the faint breeze that filtered in through the open balcony doors. The scent of fresh mountain air mixed with the floral arrangements that adorned the room. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, her heart pounding with excitement. This was it. The day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her dress, the anticipation nearly overwhelming. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was her father. He stepped inside, his eyes immediately welling up with tears as he took in the sight of his daughter in her wedding gown. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elizabeth smiled, blinking away her own tears. "I can't believe this is finally happening." Her father took her hands and squeezed them gently. "Kevin is a lucky man. And you are going to have the most beautiful life together." The moment was fleeting, but it cemented itself in Elizabeth's heart forever. She had never felt more loved, more ready to take this step. Outside, Kevin stood at the altar waiting for his bride. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the outdoor ceremony, illuminating the faces of the guests who had gathered from all over the world to witness this union. He shifted on his feet, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, exhaling slowly. He wasn't nervous. He was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the love he felt for Elizabeth, by the realization that in just a few moments she would be his wife. Then the music started. The gentle hum of strings filled the air, and all eyes turned toward the large wooden doors that led to the terrace. The doors opened slowly, revealing Elizabeth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She was radiant. Her beauty was something words could never capture, but it wasn't just the gown, the veil, or the soft curls that framed her face. It was the way she looked at Kevin, as if he was the only thing in the world that mattered. Kevin swallowed hard, his throat tightening. His heart thundered in his chest as she made her way toward him, step by step, with a grace that made time feel like it had slowed. She reached him and he took her hands in his grip firm but tender. The officiant's voice was steady as he began the ceremony, speaking words of love, commitment, and the sacred vows that would bind them together. Kevin and Elizabeth exchanged rings, their hands slightly trembling, their gazes locked. "I, Kevin, take you, Elizabeth, to be my wife," Kevin said, his voice rich with emotion. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes as she repeated her own vows, her voice steady despite the rush of emotion flooding through her. When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, Kevin wasted no time pulling her into his arms. Their lips met, and the world around them erupted into cheers and applause. Their families beamed with pride, their friends clapped enthusiastically, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Just them. Just their love. They had done it. After years of love, friendship, and devotion, they were finally bound together as husband and wife. As they turned to face the guests, the sun dipped lower behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the castle grounds. The reception was waiting for them, but before they could step away from the altar, Elizabeth's father stepped forward with a knowing smile. "I have one last surprise for the both of you," he announced, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. From beyond the castle walls, a low hum filled the air. It grew louder, more distinct, until finally it became clear what it was: a helicopter. The sleek aircraft descended gracefully onto the manicured lawn, its metallic exterior reflecting the fading sunlight. "This," her father continued, "is my wedding gift to you both. A private flight over the Alps, a chance to take in this incredible day from the skies." Elizabeth let out a delighted gasp, turning to Kevin with sparkling eyes. "Can you believe this?" Kevin chuckled, shaking his head in awe. "Your father really knows how to make an impression." The guests cheered as the couple walked toward the helicopter, waving to their loved ones. The pilot stood by, ready to take them on a flight they would never forget. Elizabeth looked at Kevin one last time before stepping inside. "This is the best day of my life." Kevin kissed her forehead, pulling her close as they settled into their seats. Neither of them knew that within minutes, everything would change. The helicopter lifted smoothly off the ground, the powerful rotors slicing through the cool mountain air as Kevin and Elizabeth waved to the guests below. The sun was setting behind the jagged peaks, casting golden light across the snow-capped mountains, while the emerald lake below shimmered like glass. Everything felt surreal. Inside the helicopter, Elizabeth leaned against Kevin, her fingers intertwined with his as she gazed out at the breathtaking landscape. "This is incredible," she murmured, eyes wide with wonder. Kevin smiled, squeezing her hand. "I don't think this day could get any more perfect." The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. "We'll take a route that circles the mountain ridge before heading over the valley. You're in for a spectacular view." Elizabeth beamed. "Thank you so much for this." The pilot nodded, focused on maneuvering the aircraft through the crisp mountain air. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic thumping of the rotors filled the cabin, a comforting sound that blended seamlessly with the tranquil beauty of the surroundings. For the first few minutes, everything was peaceful. Kevin and Elizabeth admired the landscape below, pointing out the winding roads that looked like silver threads weaving through the valley. The alpine meadows stretched out in vibrant green patches, and the setting sun painted the peaks in hues of pink and gold. Then it happened. A sudden jolt. Elizabeth gasped as the helicopter shuddered violently, tilting slightly to the left. The calm expression on the pilot's face disappeared in an instant, replaced by one of sharp concentration. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Kevin's heart pounded. "What was that?" The pilot's voice was tight. "Strong crosswind. It came out of nowhere." The helicopter lurched again, harder this time. The body of the aircraft swayed unpredictably as the wind howled against the fuselage. The once serene atmosphere inside the cabin turned tense, heavy with unspoken fear. Kevin's grip on Elizabeth's hand tightened. "Is everything under control?" The pilot exhaled sharply, adjusting the controls. "I'm trying to stabilize. Stay calm." Elizabeth's breath came in short, panicked bursts as she clutched Kevin's arm. "Kevin!" And then the worst possible sound filled the cabin. A loud, deafening bang. The rotors let out a strained whine as the helicopter suddenly pitched forward. The sky tilted violently. The engine sputtered, choked, then went silent. Elizabeth screamed. Kevin's stomach lurched as gravity took hold, their bodies lifting slightly from their seats before the safety harnesses locked them in place. The mountains and lake below spun wildly as the aircraft tumbled out of control. The pilot fought desperately with the controls. "We've lost power. I'm trying to—" Another violent shake. The helicopter plummeted faster. Wind roared through the cabin as Kevin turned to Elizabeth, his eyes filled with sheer terror. "Hold on to me!" Elizabeth clutched at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to die!" The ground rushed toward them at an impossible speed. The once beautiful Emerald Lake was now a distant blur, the jagged rocks below drawing closer with each passing second. Kevin held her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him despite the chaos. "I love you." A sob broke from her lips. "I love you too." The pilot's voice was barely audible over the deafening roar of wind. "Brace for impact." And then, impact. A blinding flash of white, a deafening explosion, and silence. The explosion sent a shockwave across the mountainside, a deafening roar that echoed through the valley below. Flames erupted from the shattered remains of the helicopter, sending thick black smoke spiraling into the cold alpine sky. The wreckage was strewn across the rocky terrain, twisted metal and shattered glass reflecting the dying light of the sunset. The once serene landscape was now marred by fire and destruction. From the castle grounds, the wedding guests stood frozen in horror. Seconds ago, they had been cheering, watching the helicopter ascend into the evening sky, their hearts full of joy. Now, their cheers had turned into screams. Mothers clutched their children, fathers held their wives, and friends stood motionless, their faces pale with shock. Elizabeth's mother let out a gut-wrenching wail, collapsing into her husband's arms as her knees gave way. "No, no, no, no!" Her voice cracked with agony, her whole body trembling as she watched the fire consume the wreckage. Kevin's father, a man known for his stoic composure, stood rigid, his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set in an expression of sheer disbelief. He had watched his son, his only child, board that helicopter with his new wife, full of life and love. And now, in mere moments, they were gone. Elizabeth's father stumbled forward, his breath shallow. The helicopter had been his gift, his grand surprise for his daughter and her husband. His vision blurred with tears as he choked out a desperate plea. Someone, do something." The guests surged toward the edge of the castle grounds, desperate to see, to understand, to deny the horror unfolding before their eyes. But the fire was relentless. The thick smoke carried the sickening scent of burning metal and fuel, smothering the fresh mountain air. The emergency response was immediate. Calls were made, alarms were raised, and within minutes, rescue helicopters were dispatched. But deep down, everyone knew. There was no rescue to be made, no survivors to be saved. The wreckage was a graveyard of shattered dreams. The fire, an unforgiving force, devoured the last remnants of Kevin and Elizabeth's perfect day. And then, As if the heavens themselves mourned, the wind shifted. The flames flickered, and amidst the rising smoke, something small and delicate detached from the wreckage. A single piece of white fabric, Elizabeth's veil. It drifted down from the flames, carried by the mountain breeze, untouched by fire or ruin. The guests watched in stunned silence as it floated, twisting and turning, before finally settling in the wildflowers that covered the mountainside. A piece of her, forever resting in the place where her love story had come to its tragic end. Somewhere in the distance, the church bells rang, soft, hollow chimes that echoed across the valley. Their song was not one of celebration, but of mourning. True love, a perfect day, and a fate no one could have foreseen. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes even the most beautiful moments end in tragedy. What are your thoughts on this heartbreaking story? Let us know in the comments. If you found this video compelling, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story.